This wasn't the first time she had heard strange noises from the woods behind her home. Living so close to the Myakka River State Park, unusual sounds and even strange smells were just a part of life. However, the last few nights had been different. After noticing a few things missing from her back porch, she wanted to get to the bottom of it. After grabbing her camera off the kitchen bar and snapping a few photos of the dark nothingness behind her home, those photos would reveal something sinister. But before we begin, if you love cryptids and want to learn the full story, both the legends and the facts delivered as a narrative story, then this guided tour is for you. Walk on over and tap the subscribe, like, or review button depending on where you watch or listen. Now, throw on your waders, grab your flashlights, and don't forget the bug spray. The tour is about to start. I'm Elaine, and you're touring cryptids across the Atlas. Sugarloaf Key's Bat Tower, also known as Perky's Bat Tower after its builder, Clyde Perky, was first erected in March of 1929. For decades, Perky's Bat Tower boasted as one of the great roadside attractions along the 115-mile ribbon of asphalt known as the Overseas Highway. Located in Monroe County, both Florida's and the United States' southernmost county, this bat tower once stood as a 30-foot-tall sanctuary for Florida's own velvety free-tailed bat before Hurricane Irma came through in 2017, destroying the tower in its wake. In the 1920s, though, Clyde Perky had big dreams for Sugarloaf Key. After having purchased commercial land in Sugarloaf Key, one of those dreams included creating a fishing camp for students. However, he quickly realized that this dream would never come to fruition because the Florida Keys were ridden with mosquitoes. But Clyde was determined to make something work. That's when he stumbled upon the book Bats, Mosquitoes, and Dollars, written by Dr. Charles Campbell. In this book, Dr. Campbell wrote extensively about how vital bats were in controlling the mosquito population. Dr. Campbell even promoted his own bat tower design with the intention of creating a safe haven for these bats to nest in. Enthralled by this idea, Clyde brought Dr. Campbell's bat tower instructions and got to work. Not only did he build the tower, he also bought special bat bait from Dr. Campbell per his instructions that was supposed to lure the bats into the tower. And by special bat bait, I mean bat poop, better known as guano. When the tower was all finished, there was even a plaque that read, "Dedicated to good health at Perky, Florida by Mr. and Mrs. R.C. Perky, dated March 15, 1929. As it stood, Clyde had high expectations for this bat tower. He had the building, he had the guano, all he was missing but the bats. But not wanting to wait any longer, he also purchased a mail-order supply of bats that he set free inside the guano-infused tower in hopes that they would take the bait. He believed that once the bats got settled, the mosquito population would be better controlled, and he could finally start his dream of creating a fishing camp. Unfortunately, the guano failed to keep the bats inside, as they all flew off upon arrival, leaving the bat tower vacant. But Clyde didn't give up hope. He knew these bats just had to get acclimated to their surroundings, and after 3 days of releasing these bats into the wild, they came back. For hours into the night, they fluttered back and forth around the tower, filling up on the all-you-can-eat mosquito buffet. However, something large and mysterious began slowly creeping behind the nearby tree line that would spook these bats once and for all. According to a mysterious letter found decades later, an observer wrote, "The bats came back after 3 days. As dusk fell on the 4th day, I watched them fly out of the tower like a slow, seeping cloud, and toward the end, when just a few bats were still flying out and into the night, something else happened that I found terrifying. A large, hairy figure stepped out of the trees and walked over to the tower. It must have stood all of 8 feet tall and walked slowly around, staring up and down and then here and there, reaching up and pushing at the tower's side with those big hands. At one point, it reached up at the corner and started shaking it a little. I thought the tower would topple over. The last few bats flew out and off over the trees. That was the last time I saw either one, the big thing or the bats. But what was the big thing, you ask? Could the guano have baited something else entirely? Well, according to residents in the Florida Everglades, the mysterious hairy figure in question is none other than the skunk ape. Often described as standing nearly 8 foot tall with shaggy, dark fur and glowing red eyes, this cryptid goes by many names. Call it the stink ape, the Myakka skunk ape, the monster of the Myakka, or the most popular name, the Florida skunk ape. This southern Bigfoot seems to be an anomaly amongst many Floridians, starting with possibly the most bizarre characteristic, its overwhelming odorous stench, which the cryptid is aptly named. Apparently, this smell has been described as a revolting mixture of wet dog, skunk, and rotting eggs. Some even believe there are more than one skunk ape hiding beneath the shadows. Many even believe that the skunk ape comes from an entire family of Bigfoot-type creatures ranging in size, age, and color. For size, the skunk ape is said to range between 6 to 9 foot tall, depending on the report. While most of the descriptions fall in line with dark fur and glowing red eyes, others speculate their eyes glow red at night when reflecting light, but are actually just brown during the daytime. For color, many believe the skunk ape's shaggy dark fur has a variety of colors ranging from reddish brown, dark brown, black, and silvery gray. And as for age, some describe the senior silvery gray skunk apes as having milky blue eyes due to possible cataracts from old age. No matter its age, size, or fur coloring though, many conclude that this foul-smelling beast leaves a rather large footprint behind wherever it goes. According to many of these accounts, the footprints can measure up to 24 inches long, 8 inches wide, and the depth of these footprints imply the creature could weigh around 600 pounds. It's also said that these footprints have human similarities. However, upon a closer look at casts, show an absence of an arch in the foot, and the first 3 toes all seem to be a similar length. As for its demeanor, locals claim the skunk ape to be more aggressive than its West Coast cousin Sasquatch. There are a few accounts from people who have claimed to have been chased by the skunk ape, like when 2 young men reported a silver creature chasing them out of the woods under a streetlight. Another report in 1942 states that a man from Suwannee County, Florida, witnessed the skunk ape rush out of the bush line while he was driving down an isolated road, where the creature decided to grab onto his vehicle, beat on the running board and door for about a half a mile, and then leaping off into the woodline. Or, in the spring of 1966, when Miss Eula Lewis, a Brooksville, Florida native, claimed that a Bigfoot chased her into her house, and while swinging its big arms towards her as her dogs barked incessantly. And again, later that same year, as 4 teenagers were driving around one late night in December, they all reported a smelly Bigfoot who had jumped on the hood of their car, except for this one had glowing green eyes. But not all of skunk ape sightings are alike. Some residents claim the creature dabbles in thievery when it's not terrorizing unsuspecting victims. According to a local newspaper in 1818 from Apalachicola, Florida, one person claimed that they saw a man-sized monkey raiding food stores and stalking fishermen along the shore. Not to mention the number of complaints in 1973 of a large monkey or ape raiding homes in Northport, Florida, where many residents claimed this creature had been stealing their garbage. And when the Boy Scouts of America decided to call their yearly gathering the Bigfoot Wilderness Survival Camporee, the Scouts had planned to camp on the outskirts of the Green Swamp to study wilderness survival. But they too found things coming up missing, because apparently there are 2 things no skunk ape can resist: lima beans and chocolate chip cookies. When the Boy Scouts tried to lure the skunk ape to their campsite by setting out a late-night snack consisting of lima beans, chocolate chip cookies, and even a bag of pork skins, they patiently awaited the results. But when they unzipped their sleeping bags and ran out to the snack site that following morning, both the lima beans and cookies were gone, only leaving behind the pile of pork skins. let's revisit those complaints from 1973, shall we? Due to the large number of residents claiming apes were raiding their garbage cans, it's important that we highlight this theory. Could the skunk ape really be an escaped monkey on the loose? And are the foul-smelling, roaming beasts in the woods actually just wild apes? Well, it is a popular theory. You see, many of these complaints were forwarded to Michael Corradino of the Florida Monkey Sanctuary. It was Michael's job to capture loose simians for Sarasota County and had previously been called by the local government for his expertise. But when these many residents claimed to have seen a similar figure inside their homes raiding their garbage, there was major trouble. In an article published by the Boca Beacon in August 1981, Michael stated, "We had a problem right from the beginning. It was the first time we had gone after a monkey and couldn't see it, let alone catch it." A few weeks later, after still not catching the creature, Michael had once more been called up by the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department. This time, a young boy named Ronnie Steves had seen it firsthand, and it attacked and injured his ducks. As Michael shared, Ronnie had heard a commotion outside his bedroom and looked out to see what it was. What he claims to have seen is a large, hairy animal chasing the ducks. As the 10-year-old boy called out to his father and raced outside to save his ducks, Ronnie ran back inside screaming, claiming that he had seen an ape staring right at him that stood taller than his 6'5" father. After this report, deputies, Michael, and his staff concluded that in fact something rather large did indeed hurt Ronnie's ducks. When asked what type of monkey would do something like this, Michael said, "I wasn't convinced I wasn't still chasing a monkey, but it didn't follow normal monkey patterns, and it shouldn't have been out at night. Most monkeys are asleep by sunset." What followed these initial sightings, Michael couldn't quite explain. Michael shared that, of course, some people are obvious liars, but some saw something that they couldn't explain, and there were a large number of people who, in my opinion, were very sincere about what they saw. Most of these sightings revolved around the creature having a very man-like stature with an all-over hairy body and was rather heavy. It possessed great strength where it often ripped down gates, and it was almost always spotted by the Myakka River or a waterway leading to it. The sightings also usually occurred during the dry season and would disappear when the rainy season began. Other details Michael shared align with the previous held belief that the skunk ape was vicious in nature, which, disclaimer, you may want to fast forward a minute or two if you're sensitive to animal cruelty. I'll go ahead and give you about a 3-second start. According to the Boca Beacon, Michael described how this creature, whether monkey, ape, or unknown beast, would use its strength to rip open cages to get to small animals, much like Ronnie's small ducks. Apparently, this creature was drawn to small animals like ducks, rabbits, and chickens, where Michael described the way it killed and ate these small animals by biting off their heads, drinking their blood, and leaving the rest of their body behind. Which, if you ask me, this sounds a lot like the chupacabra or even the Chattawa monster we covered several episodes back. As for Michael, they had a nickname for this vicious creature before it was popularized as the skunk ape. According to Michael, we used to call it the Abominable Snowbird. But why so many sightings? Well, it seems Michael and his team at the Florida Monkey Sanctuary may have an answer for that. Supposedly, the large outbreak in 1973 was possibly due to thousands of acres of land being cleared and developed near Venice around that time. They said it was not unusual to see large numbers of animals crossing the rural roads at night. When asked if he believed in the skunk ape, Michael answered, "If the creature does exist, it's probably the same thing that mountain climbers have encountered in Tibet." And when asked if he believed the supposed footage of its West Coast cousin, he said, "I've seen the film in private, and after you've run through it several times, it's hard to remain skeptical." He goes on to say, "I know something is out there. It might be a deranged man, although there would have had to be many of those to cover the state. It could be a bear, but we haven't seen bears locally for 75 years. Or it could be a swamp ape. I really don't know." Michael Corradino may not have known what's out there, but according to a neighborhood in West Palm Beach, a few select children just might have the answer. According to an article by the Palm Beach Post published on April 18, 1974, 7 young children reported seeing a figure that looked much like the skunk ape many locals claimed to have seen just a year prior. Near a wooded area on Ranch House Road, these children saw it not once, but twice. According to 9-year-old Lori Holmes, she spoke with authority saying, "I may be a little kid, but I know what I saw." As Lori and her friends all described the animal, they said the creature was about 6 to 7 foot tall, with dark, matted hair, long arms, sharp teeth, and 4 toes. One of the children, 10-year-old Tommy Streeter, said it could be a man just dressed in a suit, but I don't think it was. I saw him running on his hind legs with his arms curled out, and when I turned around, I saw a white streak on its back. As Tommy and his friend Mike Edwards reported, they saw the skunk ape about 100 yards away. According to Mike, "We were walking down the path and we saw something black and hairy in the bushes. He made some deep scratching sounds from the throat and we got scared and started running." Both boys also reported seeing the skunk ape racing out the window of an abandoned shack located next to the path in the woods they sometimes take on the way to their school. As Mike shared, he had bare skin on his knuckles and he just reached out of the window. Mike's mother, June Edwards, shared her thoughts on the creature. After calling the sheriff's department, she said, "I might have overreacted when the children came home and reported seeing the ape. But if something's wrong in the area where our kids go back and forth to school, then I don't think it hurts to check it out." But according to Mrs. Rita Carr, whose son Scott also reported seeing the ape, was inclined not to believe the children's stories, as she stated, "These kids have heard about the skunk ape and they have very vivid imaginations. It shows you how kids will go through mass hysteria, just like grown-ups." Okay, so maybe Rita's thoughts about the children's encounter may be valid. If the children had heard about these sightings, they could have easily made something up. And of course, we do have to acknowledge Rita's thoughts about adults as well. We can take things a little too far. But with just a few months before the children's encounter, how did so many drivers see the exact same limping creature walking down the same back road? Are we all in on the same joke, or is there something else here entirely? It was just after midnight on January 9, 1974, when Richard Lee Smith had slammed his car into something near the intersection of U.S. Route 27 and Hollywood Boulevard on the eastern edge of the Everglades in Pembroke Pines. Originally, Richard told the Florida Highway Patrol that he initially thought he'd hit a tall man in dark clothing, but was stunned when a 7 or 8 foot tall hairy creature lifted itself off the road, roared at him, and charged his car, where Richard gunned his engine and took off. A couple hours later, multiple drivers in the area reported seeing a limping giant walking along US 27. Officers were dispatched at around 2:12 a.m. when a patrolman reported seeing a huge, hairy creature limping along the road a few miles from the accident scene before it disappeared into the brush. At dawn, police searched the swamp with 2 helicopters, but they didn't find anything. But, as we've previously discussed, this isn't the only incident where drivers claim to have either hit the creature by accident or where the creature latched onto the cars before leaping off into the distance. One such incident was reported by Vietnam War veteran and former police officer Charles Stokeman, his wife Leslie, and his 3 children who lived on the ocean side near mile marker 94.5 on Key Largo. On July 14, 1977, a few years after Richard Smith's driving encounter, Charles and his 13-year-old son Charlie were collecting bottles and thick red mangroves behind their home when they caught sight of an enormous 8 or 9 foot tall skunk ape. According to Charles, it had a huge head and shoulders, long fur all over, and it stank like a dirty, wet dog. The noise he made was a high-pitched wailing. Once more, less than a week later, on July 21, 1977, around 7:45 a.m., A real estate agent spotted a skunk ape cross in front of her while driving on Burns Road in Big Cypress. She described it as a very shaggy-looking, maybe 6.5 or 7 feet tall creature. 15 minutes later, a fire chief managed to snap a photograph of the same skunk ape after it entered the forest near his home. According to the fire chief, "I was riding along when 800 feet in front of me, a brown-looking tall thing ran across the road. It wasn't a bear, that's for sure. It ran into the woods. At first, I thought it was a bear, but bears don't stay up on 2 hind legs like the way this thing was." Another incident worth mentioning was when Steve Goodbread, a guide for Pelican Tours, was driving a bus with 30 tourists along Turner River Road in Big Cypress when he observed a large creature standing erect behind some brush approximately 70 yards away. It was described about 7 feet tall, with thick brown hair covering its entire body. The creature was rocking back and forth, shaking the bushes, and appeared irritated by their presence. Steve and his passengers observed what they believed to be a skunk ape for at least 15 minutes. He tried to persuade one of the tourists to take a picture on her camera as she was exiting the bus, but she refused. In retrospect, Steve said it was probably a good idea that no one got off the bus. He drove away with the creature still in sight. Even though Steve had always believed in the possibility that the skunk ape existed, he was shaken by the experience and refused to advertise or exploit the skunk ape with his tours. And then you have Dow Rowland, a guide for Everglades Day Safari. According to the Miami Herald, Dow was hauling 6 British tourists up Turner River Road when they spotted the ape man loping along the cypress trees about 2 miles north of Tamiami Trail. In his words, it was about 6 feet tall with brown, long fur. It loped along like a big monkey or a gorilla. Then it disappeared into the woods. He also went on to say that this group was not the first to see the ape man this summer. There was a sighting from the Naples trolley tour out of Marco Island where the driver was really shook up, he said. But Dow's encounter certainly wouldn't be the last. Within 2 weeks, there had been over 50 people who reported seeing the large hairy creature outside of the Big Cypress National Reserve. Of course, you're always going to have your skeptics, those who don't believe in such legends. Unless we've physically seen something like this with our own eyes, it's hard for many of us to believe in such stories. It's hard to believe pictures or videos as literal proof because these things can easily be doctored nowadays. And with the ever-evolving AI technology, it becomes even harder to distinguish what's real and what isn't. But for one Floridian woman, the skunk ape was very much real. And the pictures she took, some of the most compelling pieces of evidence that argue the Myakka skunk ape is very much alive. Oh, and aside from lima beans, he is also a really big fan of apples, which is very common in the lore behind Bigfoot. Legend has it, if you set out an apple in the woods while camping, Bigfoot will take this as a peace offering and won't bother you. It seems like an apple a day keeps the Sasquatch at bay. As for the anonymous woman from Sarasota County, it seems like the apple theory worked. Only she wasn't freely giving them away. No, the skunk ape seemed to be stealing them instead. According to a letter sent in by this anonymous woman, sometime during the early falls of 2000, she began noticing unusual sounds and strange smells coming from her backyard one night. The only problem is that every time she went out back to investigate the scene, she never really saw anything out of the ordinary. No claw marks, no trash cans knocked over, no sign of forced entry. The only thing missing? Her basket of apples. While she definitely thought this was strange, she didn't really think anything of it until it happened several nights in a row. She'd refill her apple basket during the day, and at night she would hear weird noises, smell strange scents, go out on her back porch and find nothing but the apples come up missing once more. Curious as to what could be stealing her produce, she decided that enough was enough. She was going to finally catch this thing in the act. So one night, she grabbed her camera off the kitchen counter and walked out on her back porch and snapped several photos to settle this once and for all. And by the time she took the second photo, she realized there was something quite dangerous in her backyard and she needed to get away from it and fast. Later, she would go on to write a letter to the Sarasota County Police Department along with the photos saying, "Dear Sir or Madam, enclosed, please find some pictures I took in late September or early October of 2000. My husband says he thinks it is an orangutan. Is someone missing an orangutan? It is hard to judge from the photos how big this orangutan really is. It was in a crouching position and froze as soon as the flash went off. I didn't even see it as I took the first photo because it was so dark. As soon as the flash went off for the second time, it stood up and started to move. I then heard the orangutan walk off into the brushes. From where I was standing, I judge it as being about 6.5 to 7 feet tall in a kneeling position. As soon as I realized how close I was, I got back to the house. It had an awful smell that lasted well after it had left my yard. The orangutan was making these deep womp womp noises. It sounded much farther away than it turned out to be. If I had known it was as close to the hedgerow as it was, I wouldn't have walked up as close as I did. I'm a senior citizen, and if this animal had come out of the hedgerow after me, there wasn't a thing I could have done about it. I was about 10 feet away from it when it stood up. I'm concerned because my grandchildren like to come down and explore in my backyard. An animal this big could hurt someone seriously. Please find out where this animal came from and who it belongs to. It shouldn't be loose like this. Someone will get hurt. Why haven't people been told that an animal this size is loose? How are people to know how dangerous this thing could be? If I had known an animal like this was loose, I wouldn't have approached it. I saw on the news that monkeys that get loose can carry hepatitis and are very dangerous. Please look after this situation. I don't want my backyard to turn into someone else's circus. God bless. It makes you wonder, with this many sightings and a woman's plea for the police to catch this thing, it's hard not to believe in something. I mean, with over thousands of reports of the Florida skunk ape, be it orangutan or not, something is surely stalking southern Florida. Just ask Dave Shealy. Dave Shealy, the self-proclaimed Jane Goodall of skunk apes and the owner and operator of the Skunk Ape Research Center outside of Big Cypress National Preserve, has seen the skunk ape not once, not twice, not 3, but 4 times. His first encounter with the skunk ape was in 1973, when he was about 10 years old, when he was deer hunting with his brother Jack in the Big Cypress National Preserve. According to Dave, it was walking across the swamp, and my brother spotted it first, but I couldn't see it over the grass. I wasn't tall enough. My brother picked me up and I saw it about 100 yards away. It looked like a man but completely covered with hair. As they just stared at this creature with their mouths agape, it quickly started pouring down rain. With this, Dave shares that the ape hurried away into the cypress hummocks scattered amongst the marsh, where he remembered thinking, "Holy crap, I finally saw this thing and it just got away." And due to his multiple encounters, Dave has made a name for himself, becoming the expert on all things skunk ape, including creating a field guide, making TV appearances on shows like Unsolved Mysteries and Comedy Central's The Daily Show, investigating multiple sightings, and even creating the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters. When Atlas Obscura asked why he spends so much time searching for the skunk ape, he replied, "There's not much to do around here. It's just something that's interesting. It never gets boring. I've fished and hunted all my life. I'm fished and hunted out." One of Dave Shealy's most notable skunk ape encounters happened in July of 2000 when he captured it on video just a few months prior to the infamous skunk ape photo from Sarasota County. Shooting from hundreds of feet away, Dave seems to capture the creature walking through palm trees, where it eventually strides through the open swamp and breaks into a long-limbed run as though suddenly aware it's being watched, escaping into a grove of palm trees. At the time, Dave shared that the swamp was covered with over a foot of water, making the creature's speed impossible for any human to match. But of course, floods of skeptics have their theories and have often poked holes in this grainy footage, stating that it's too blurry to see anything substantial. Even a spokesperson from the Smithsonian said, "It's extremely hard to watch this video and see anything but a guy in a gorilla suit." Some even speculated that if tons of research has been done on the Everglades, with motion-activated trail cameras, then we would have seen other footage of this creature. One critic of the skunk ape is Bob DeGrosse, a public affairs officer with the preserve. He stated that people report seeing this mythical creature from time to time, but there's never been a substantiated sighting of the skunk ape that was verified by National Park Service wildlife staff. Another critic, Sharon Hill, a researcher and columnist for the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, who has written about Bigfoot, the skunk ape, and other mythical creatures. In her words, the empirical evidence is extremely weak. It's almost entirely eyewitness testimony, which is the most unreliable evidence you can have. But Dave Shealy doesn't take any of this criticism to heart. He believes what he has seen and doesn't care if other people believe him, or any of the other numerous skunk ape sightings for that matter. Dave Shealy is the expert on the skunk ape after all. He's the one who is going out there, catching footage of the creature, and still researching this unknown cryptid, while other people laugh and mock him. But other people's disbelief doesn't stunt his belief, it only fuels it. In fact, Dave realizes that some of these interviews he's done about the skunk ape may sound sensationalized and may not prove the legitimacy of the skunk ape. However, he believes it can only boost tourism. In his word, there are beaches all over the world, but who else has a skunk ape? And his thoughts about the skeptics? I know what I've seen. I don't have a choice but to believe because I've seen him several times. For someone who hasn't come here and put in the time to say otherwise, it doesn't really matter to me. But of course, we never stray away from the skeptical perspective here on Cryptids Across the Atlas. Part of learning about cryptids and the folklore behind them is highlighting all there is to learn about these creatures. You can have the supposed encounters and eyewitness sightings, but then you also have the tall tales and hoaxes. And then there's also viable explanations that venture less into the paranormal and supernatural to the more normal and natural ways of the world. Talking about things unknown is always welcome, but we also never want to shy away from the very real possibilities. Much like trying to prove these things exist, proving they don't exist also matters. In fact, many people believe that the skunk ape is none other than a wild monkey or ape. Of course, this belief may not be a new theory, as ape is literally in its name. And we can't forget about all of those wild monkey sightings back in 1973. Even if they weren't able to find those loose monkeys, doesn't mean a primate wasn't to blame for the stolen garbage or injured pets. Some even speculate if this ape is actually an orangutan due to its large features. According to cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman, having done extensive research on the cryptid itself, suggests the skunk ape, similar to the findings of the infield monster we covered a few episodes back, is more primate in nature. In his words, being a cryptozoologist doesn't mean you just openly hook, line, and sinker take everything in. As for the horrible stench, described as a revolting mixture of wet dog, skunk, and rotting eggs, many people resort to swamp gas. In fact, swamp gas is often depicted as having a sulfuric, rotten egg odor that occurs naturally in sewers, manure pits, well water, oil, and gas wells, and volcanoes. According to the Everglades Foundation, phosphorus levels are of utmost concern. Elevated mostly by agricultural pollution, excess phosphorus transforms Everglades marshes to cattails and contributes to foul-smelling toxic algae blooms in the rivers and lakes. So swamp gas could be the reason behind the foul odor emanating throughout the Florida Keys. Not to mention, there is a large hunting community in the Florida Everglades, including duck hunting. If you ask me, getting a bunch of guys out in the subtropical wilderness, hunting various animals, and being out in the muggy heat all day would cause a musky stench. While I'm not sure exactly what all of those people saw driving down US Route 27, but I could definitely see a hunter losing track of time, getting lost in the wetlands, and come out looking like a disheveled, hairy Bigfoot, but that's just my opinion. And then of course you've got the practical jokesters. Supposedly, Mike Falconer, a Florida resident, claimed to have captured the skunk ape on his iPhone when he and his son spotted a large hairy creature walking across a large field. According to Mike, I saw something that was very big, very tall, more than 6 feet tall for sure, and it was shaped like a person. It was very dark, and it was maybe 1/3 of a mile, maybe a half mile away, running, and it just kept moving. The thing was actually on the other side of the Myakka River, but I didn't know that until it started getting muddy, and I wasn't able to continue after that. But it seems like the only thing Mike caught on his iPhone camera was just a human wearing an ape suit. A manager of the Myakka River State Park stated, "We got a report of a congregation of people on the side of Park Road, so one of our rangers went to check it out. We evicted a young man from the park that day who was caught wearing an ape suit. The park has a long history of people doing that kind of stuff for laughs." Hoax or not, the legacy of this beast has certainly captured the hearts of those in Florida. You may believe the skunk ape is nothing more than a wild orangutan who just has a hankering for lima beans, chocolate chip cookies, or fresh apples. Or you may be like Dave Shealy, who longs for the legend of skunk ape to be true, a real mythical beast who calls the swampy Everglades its home. A cryptid whose story blurs the lines between reality and myth that evokes a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity. Maybe it is a real cryptid. Maybe it can be easily explained away by loose wild monkeys. Or maybe all of Florida is on one giant prank. But one thing is for sure, the skunk ape lives on, at least in spirit. If you love cryptids and want to learn even more about the creatures we just talked about, find us on TikTok or Instagram. Just search username @thecryptidatlas. By the way, the episode you just witnessed is both a podcast and YouTube video, so whichever format you prefer, we have you covered. Also, check out our interactive cryptid map to browse the globe and learn about cryptids from your favorite areas. Every episode we make adds another pin to our map. You can find our social channels, the map, and more at thecryptidatlas.com. And when you find us, be sure to tap that follow button and get in on the action by dropping a comment on our recent videos. If you enjoy the show, consider sharing it on with a friend. Sharing the spooky love with someone else is the best compliment you could ever give us. And if you listen on Apple or Spotify, consider leaving an honest review to help other listeners know what to expect. Thanks for touring cryptids across the Atlas. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You never know what you might see just on the edge of the road.